allegation from a top disinformation expert that the university forced her out to protect Facebook's parent company, Meta. Joan Donovan says she was investigating internal documents from Meta, which show that the company knew about and monitored the real-world harm its social media site caused. Now, around that same time, Mark Zuckerberg's philanthropic company, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, donated $500 million with a B to Harvard for AI research. Now, in a formal whistleblower disclosure to school leadership, Donovan's legal team claims that she was targeted in order to protect the interests of high-value donors with obvious and direct ties to Meta, Facebook. She's now calling for an investigation into Harvard, and we've reached out, we do want to mention, to Harvard for comment, but they have not responded to our request. Joan Donovan, though, she joins me right now in studio. Thank you so much for being with us.
I'm happy to be here.
I know this is something you've been dealing with for quite a while, but for folks who aren't familiar with this, when did you start noticing some issues?
Yeah, so prior to October 2021, when Frances Haugen's disclosures came out, I was a top researcher, program director, research director of the Shorenstein Center at the Harvard Kennedy School, was raising millions of dollars to do my research. And then, unfortunately, the dean asked me to be part of a donor meeting in late October 2021. So these are all high-value donors that were part of the Dean's Council. And we kicked off the discussion talking about the Facebook whistleblower papers from Frances Haugen. And I revealed on that call in front of 50 prestigious donors that I believed I was the only researcher in the world to have the documents in hand, and that I believed they were the most important documents in Internet history. From that day forward, I was treated very differently by the dean himself, as well as other staff leadership at the Kennedy School. They didn't let me fundraise. They took away my ability to hire, even though I had millions of dollars sitting in the bank at Harvard. And they first tried to starve me of my own work and make it uncomfortable for me to stay there. But eventually the restrictions became much more explicit to the point where I ended up losing my job.
And this conversation with, Frances's work and your work and about the disinformation on Facebook. This is one that has been unfolding, unraveling in both Capitol Hill and conversations on national television, on local television and things like that. Did you think that you'd ever get swept up into that conversation?
I tried as best I could to be above the fray.
Yeah.
I've been researching fringe groups online since my PhD dissertation, which was on social movements and Occupy. I then started studying white supremacists. So my research has always been on the leading edge of what we call Internet studies. So when disinformation became very popular, I was recruited to come to Harvard to do this research. What developed over the years in our field, though, was this feeling that we're going to have bad actors forever. But there's something about the design of these very platforms that are enabling them to go bigger with their hate speech, to amplify hate and harassment, to amplify lies, and of course culminating in an event like January 6th, which even inside those Facebook whistleblower files, there was research that Facebook had conducted internally that suggested that they knew that their algorithms were a pipeline to radicalization. And so I felt a moral obligation as a professor and as an academic to put this information into the public domain.
We mentioned that the Kennedy School declined to comment on our program, but they did give a response to NBC 10 when asked about for comment on your accusations. And they say Joan Donovan was not fired. Harvard University and Harvard Kennedy School continue to carry out path-breaking research on misinformation in the world of social media in society. By policy and in practice, donors have no influence over this or other work. However, they seem like, at least to me, they have $500 million of reasons there to...
Yeah, I think what the broader conversation right now is revealing about university leadership is that, you know, in the case of the situation at UPenn with the resignation of the president, there was $100 million on the line if she stayed. You know, that was going to disappear. And I think that I have seen enough internal workings of academic research that donors can put their thumb on the scale. Donors often ask for. And I was even invited to the Dean's Council to give a preview of the work that wasn't published yet, right? And so donors have inside access. And if for years, Facebook tried to get me to take funding or data from them and to partner with them. But I believed that if I was really going to do this work without influence, I can't even have the appearance of influence to get it done. And unfortunately, you know, this is probably just funny for some of the listeners that have lost their jobs and you know, the viewers, is that, yeah, Harvard didn't technically make me leave that day. But what they did is they stopped me from being able to use my research funding. They took away or terminated the position of research director that I was in, and they got rid of my team. And then they said, but you can still teach, right? Which is a part-time position, no health insurance, no research backing. And I felt like that was sort of adding insult to injury, in the sense that they know I love to teach. They know I love the students. They know that my classes get great reviews. My class is often sold out. And I just felt like they were being completely disingenuous in the offer, even.
And I know your team, your legal team has stated this in the claim, but what role should Harvard have played once you brought this information to them in light? What should they have done?
Well, everywhere I turned, amongst leadership at Harvard and my own supervisors, they didn't want to address it. One of my supervisors in a private meeting said, if I thought Facebook had something to do with me losing my job, that I should just sue Harvard. But for now, she didn't want to hear anything about it. And when I went to HR and said, hey, you know, my supervisor's contacting my employee asking for a complaint about me, this is a toxic workplace, I'm being harassed, they said, well, that's unprofessional conduct. You know, but they weren't admitting that I was being unable, like my job description changed completely, and I wasn't able to do the work I had come there to do. And so I think when we talk about what's lost here, my work is used by people in national security. I was just on the Hill talking to several congressional offices on Thursday, and the staffers told me, we feel the absence of your voice. We depend on your research to brief senators. I'm testifying on Thursday in front of Canadian Parliament about intimidation by tech companies, not just my own, but also what's been happening in Canada with Facebook, who will not share the news anymore in Canada. So this is the consequences of doing nothing. From Harvard's position, I think, have immense reverberations for the prospects of democracy, but also for anybody that wants to do this research. They're now being told that they're not protected.
In disinformation, we have, you know, this has been said time and time again, disinformation is absolutely seen as a national security threat in some ways.
Yeah, and I had been briefing members of Congress, other governments, the government of New Zealand, Canadian governments, and lots of other places, Australia as well, in order to get them to understand that the problem wasn't just a bunch of bad actors online, that the design of these platforms themselves leave open a huge territory in which information warfare is playing out.
And so, Joan, we also have a tweet that you sent out. It describes this attack on academics, and we have it here. It says, I am part of a large pattern of crackdowns on misinformation research. We are being attacked on all sides, including governments, corporations, political operatives, and cyber troops. Silencing academics now has major implications for national security and our democracy. I think this is so true, and it goes to your point.
Yeah, and I think that some of the research that I'm going to be carrying out at Boston University is going to look very closely at these cyber troop operations. There are now 81 countries that do information warfare operations on platforms, trying to get the public to think that something isn't as bad as it is or something is worse, right? And we saw this come to a really big head during the pandemic when you wanted to know, well, what vaccine to take and when and where, and there was very little reliable information online. And the stuff that you were getting that was reliable was sandwiched between all of this media manipulation, and I'm sure viewers have encountered the grifts, scams, and hoaxes around health insurance and unemployment. So what we need is legislators to really step up and hold these platforms to account so that they aren't allowed to profit off of essentially the loss of our democracy.
Joan Donovan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.